Hey YouTube, this is the Art of Prepping. Thanks for joining me today. Just want to talk about the firearm trifecta. Sometimes it's called the Trinity of firearms. And this simply is the handgun, the rifle, and the shotgun. So these are kind of what you would consider the core firearms that people typically say that are necessary to have a rounded out firearm collection and to have full capabilities from basically the standard civilian firearms that are offered in the modern day. So my thing was, what are the things that could be a substitute? Because I have so many different people that live in parts of the world that cannot or have major restrictions on firearms. So what are the closest things to firearms to create what I would call, and this is not a demeaning type of statement, it's just a different way to look at the trifecta, but a primitive trifecta or a primitive trinity, a non-firearm related trinity. And so what I've considered was some substitutes, and let's see how this goes. For the handgun, since it's more of a up and close and personal weapon, you still want to have some distance between you and the other person, but it's much more for personal protection. And so you could say things like, of course, all these have to be deadly weapons because a firearm is also. But bladed tools in particular, there's all different sizes. It depends on what you carry well and how you could carry it. But definitely bladed tools and weapons would be probably a primary. The next one would be a tomahawk. You can conceal that as well as maybe a handgun, but if you had a pack or heavier clothing on, definitely a tomahawk could be a very good weapon. And the last one as a substitute for the handgun could be a staff. Now, the staff is kind of something that we don't talk about a lot, but man, if you train on the staff, and there's a lot of people who actually do, some people think it's a little bit more of a medieval type of self-defense tool, but people still use it all across the world. The staff, man, can be, a very good force multiplier if you know how to use it. So those are some substitutes for the handgun. Let's go ahead and go into the trifecta further with the rifle. Now, when I think of the rifle, I think of shooting longer range, longer range targets, and having the capability to inflict a deadly wound that is going to be advantageous to take down possibly larger preys or enemies. I just see it as a longer range, accurate weapon. And so when I think of that, I think of, and this is about the best we can do with more primitive weapons, at the very minimum, a spear. Now, believe it or not, a spear can be thrown very accurately if you have training and skills, many, many yards. So this is not what I would consider a very long distance, but it's definitely usable. That's definitely an option. But on the upper end, as a replacement for the rifle, I think a bow and arrow, especially a compound bow these days. Modern bows are very powerful and very accurate. And the crossbow. So you could substitute a bow and arrow and a crossbow for the rifle. And lastly, for the shotgun, this was kind of the more difficult one, but in the most primitive sense, I think that you could probably go with a sling, and then maybe a bola. That would be kind of mimic a multi-shot type of way to dispatch or at least disorient a bird or small prey. The sling you could put multiple types of pellets or rocks, gravel, if you will, to get and simulate multi-shot capability like a shotgun. Or you could put maybe just one larger piece of projectile to replicate maybe a slug in a shotgun. But what I was really thinking about probably would be the best example. Of course, this is not on the same deadly level for larger prey, but maybe for smaller prey, it could definitely do some damage, if not kill the animal. Would be to do a lot of small, pellets and or rocks and put it in a slingshot, an actual, device that would have elasticity and you could pull back and go with that. Now, you could also make various other types of devices that would be possibly a lot more deadly. But these are just some substitute. I'd be very interested about hear about what would you think that would substitute for a handgun, a rifle, and a shotgun in this trinity of firearms. If you were trying to make, though, a primitive trinity or a primitive type of trifecta. And so I thought this was kind of a cool mental exercise because back in the day, even before the medieval times, there were a lot of very good weapons. And we think of things like the shield and the sword and the bow, but there were obviously many other different types of weapon systems that were used, and they're still used today. I mean, just think about the spear, man, or maybe like various types of axes, defensive axes. There's just a lot of different tools that are simple and they work. And when they work, I even thought of maybe the shovel. Like, they have those tactical shovels that are sharpened, very, very sharp on the end. Cold Steel actually makes one that's very awesome. That could probably be a useful tool as well for self-defense. But this was kind of difficult because there's like really no match, like one-on-one equal to a firearm in different ways. But I really like, though, to try to see how close you could get when you're trying to go through these weapon choices. I guess if you really wanted to do it right, you could probably go through the master list of weapons, maybe on Wikipedia or something, and just try to really take it all in. But I was just thinking about the ones that are the most practical in my areas to substitute, and those were the ones that I mentioned. So, hey, thanks for joining me today. Hope everyone's well. Catch you later.